Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Peak Human. I'm Brian Sanders. Make sure you share this podcast with a friend, give it a review on iTunes or any podcast app, and go back to the beginning. Start back at episode 1. There's a lot of great info and great guests I've had on over the years, so please go back and soak up all the great info. Today, I'm talking with my friend Keith Norris. He is the founder of Payloaf X. He wrote the book Primal Uprising, and he's a great guy. He's a freedom fighter. He's out here in Austin fighting the good fight, standing up for what he believes in. I want to throw a plug out for Payloaf X. I'm going to be there. It's very soon. It's coming up in less than 2 weeks. You can get buy one, get one free tickets. Just click the link in my profile. Click the link in these show notes. It's a super fun time, and it's a gigantic conference. So many amazing people. I always connect with the best people there. Find out about new brands, make new friends, hear great talks. I'm an alternate speaker. If someone drops out, I may jump up on stage and do my presentation. I'm doing a presentation called Exposing the $1 Trillion Agenda Against Red Meat for KetoCon, July 8th. So put that on your calendar. That's in Austin as well. But I was going to do a version of that presentation for Payloaf X in Austin as well, coming up soon if someone drops out. If not, I'll be roaming around saying hi to people. Would love to see you. Again, just click the link in the show notes or on peak-human.com. Keith is really great. Him and his wife, Michelle, have been working really hard on this. They've done this for years. They announced this conference late because they're waiting to make sure Austin didn't require any mandates with testing or with masks or anything like that. So it's completely free of those. You show up, there's no rules. Texas is about personal freedom, taking your health into your own hands. I love that. And that's what this conference is about. And this episode is all about. Such a fun time talking to Keith. Him and Michelle wrote a great book, Primal Uprising, follows all the sapient principles. We really are on the same page and on the same page about freedom and health and not having people stepping in on that, infringing on that. So before I get on to the episode, I have no sponsors other than myself, Nose to Tail. NoseToTail.org is my company. I have local ranchers here in Texas, 4 families that just produce great meat. They do it regeneratively. They do it using holistic management. They do it with organic practices. They do it with low PUFA diets for the chicken and the pigs. They do all the right things. And we ship this out to all 48 states. You can get it at NoseToTail.org. You can get the primal ground beef. We have all kinds of different sausages. We have bone broth. We have bones to make your own bone broth. We have pretty much everything. Lamb, bison, pork, chicken, and of course beef. So get it at NoseToTail.org. We also have the biltong if you want to get your meat on the go. We have the livervore, so you can get that liver, 30% liver in the amazing stick version. The dried meat in a stick version, no sugar, no nitrates, no curing agents, none of that. We got the seasonings, all freshly ground with our own great recipes, no fillers, no funny stuff, all the best ingredients. This is the stuff that I use every day. I'm still using my dill and ranch seasoning with the Greek yogurt to make a ranch sauce. It's so good. Primal Special, that's the best seasoning, I think. I put it on the primal ground beef, of course, and steak or whatever else. But the Thai one is super good. You can put that in lamb. The Cajun, the Memphis Heat, I use that in different things. There's even a sweet chai blend that you can put in coffee or tea, or you make desserts out of it using homemade ingredients. I love it. And also the body care. I saved it for last because we're pretty much sold out. Every week I say the big batch is coming soon. We're a couple weeks closer. We'll be getting in some more soap and lip balm by the end of this week, and it should go on sale. And then in 2 weeks, I think that's the newest update for when we get the big skin food order. And then finally we get the hair product and the deodorant. That's the stuff I'm really waiting for. I've had the testers. They work great. I love this stuff. All made from beef tallow, all made by Tommy, and now with some help from a small facility. He goes and picks up the tallow and the suet from regenerative ranches around his area, and he renders it all by hand and then makes them into all these great products. So check those out, NoseToTail.org. Put in your email to get notified when they come back in stock. I'll wrap it up now. Let's get on to Keith Norris. Please enjoy this episode. I hope everyone enjoys this great message from my pal Keith. All right, we're live with Keith Norris. How's it going, man?
Man, I am doing super well, super stoked, and a little tired because it's the run up to Payloaf X. So we got a lot going on.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm so excited to come this year. I was kind of late to the game. I didn't start coming. You know what? Mark Sisson, I'll give a name drop there. Mark
Right on.
Sisson got me hooked into Payloaf X 2 years ago. It was amazing. Um, got to meet you around 2 years ago as well, after the Metabolic Health Summit, right? There was a house that a lot of people were staying at, and we watched the Super Bowl.
That house, by the way, was COVID ground zero, I believe. So it's so many people at that house got sick. And at that time, we had no clue what it was. We just thought, yeah, it's just a pretty wicked flu. And then putting the pieces back later, it was like, I wonder
Yeah,
if we were like the first wave. But yeah,
it was February, the first
it
weekend of
was like,
February of
yep,
2020.
yep,
Yeah, and we probably made plans too. I was probably talking to you like, oh yeah, we're gonna go camping, we're gonna do whatever, and then COVID
right.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. That was Super Bowl Sunday, if you remember. We were hanging out at the
Hmm.
house watching the Super Bowl that year. And Michelle and I traveled up the coast. We went up to LA. We went to a mastermind in LA. And the first couple of days of the mastermind, I thought, I was like, I don't know that I feel, maybe I'm just worn out, because we had a good time at the
Hmm.
Metabolic Health Summit. And I thought, yeah, maybe I'm just worn out. I need to relax a little bit. And then, the third day hit, and I was like, no, I got something going on. This is pretty, yeah, it knocked me on my heels for a few days, for sure. Yeah,
Mm.
totally.
Well, I still haven't had any symptoms. I somehow avoided it. Maybe I just my immune system's
Totally.
firing on all cylinders. And you know
You
what?
know,
I'll shout out to your book because I read your book, Primal
mm,
Uprising. And you mentioned this. I love this part. Well, I loved it all, but I
mm,
love this part where you're talking. You even break it down. This is my same idea of the immune system. You're like, if you are just a little tired, you're traveling, maybe you went to Paleo FX and
right,
Dry Farm Wines was there and you had some wine.
right,
Like maybe that's not the time to push your immune system.
totally. Which, and this is how it goes, right? Because when we were at Metabolic Health Symposium, yes, we were partying hard, and we were doing like, cold plunges in the Pacific. It's a February. So
Hmm.
we're doing cold plunges. I mean, we're doing all the wrong things, right, to be exposed to anything. So, I rarely get sick as well.
Hmm.
And when I got sick, when it finally turned to like, yeah, this is a bug or something, I was like, well, yeah, no doubt. You ran yourself ragged. You had a great time, and your immune system was pushed to the edge, and there was a bug floating around, and you caught it. Lesson learned.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's how it goes.
that's how it goes. But I don't know why it's not generally known that that's how it works. Like, why is flu season flu season? It's when you have the lowest vitamin D after the long winter,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, you just get it. You have your army, and your army's just
Mhm.
unmanned.
Right.
Just know that about your body and be ready for it. And yes, cold plunge, that's a stressor. Sauna could be a
Totally.
stressor. A hard workout could be a stressor. Don't do all those stressors at the wrong time.
Yeah, and it's just it's being smart, and I think the thing is too that I mean, I know all these things, right? I know them all, and in the moment, I'm like, oh, I want to hang out and have a good time and do all the things. You're going to do a cold plunge, yeah, I got this, and
Exactly.
under normal circumstances, maybe you're not exposed to anything, and cool, you're tired for a couple days, and you're off and running.
Yeah.
You just happen to show up to the craps table at the wrong time, and uh oh. You
Uh-oh.
wear yourself down and you're exposed to a bug, and you catch that. Luckily for us, for you and I and your listeners, we are super healthy human beings, and that happens rarely. That's why we rarely get sick. Those coincidences rarely line up.
Hmm.
And if they do, we're healthy enough to bounce back. This is a whole other rabbit hole, but this is why people with coexisting morbidities suffered greatly during the pandemic. Yes, all the time. People with multiple issues suffer greatly during flu season, because their immune system isn't just battling flu; it's battling inflammation, it's battling heart disease, it's battling inflammation due to obesity, it's all of these other things, it's battling diabetes, all of these, or diabetes. It's battling all of that, and then you throw in an extra stressor, the flu, and at a certain point, the system breaks.
Well, that's what our health community is trying to talk about, and even guys like Bill Maher, who I don't watch his show or anything, but he's come on lately and just kept talking about it. It's like there's a bigger epidemic going on. We're all focused on this little COVID bug. Why don't we talk about who's doing poorly with COVID, or what's the bigger issue? What's the underlying? It's always looking at the root cause, and that's what you're talking about.
Right. It's exactly that. And this is what the medical establishment refuses to look at. And, you know, we can, as we go into in Primal Uprising, I believe there's a reason for that, right? Because it is very, very profitable to have sick people around. Let's just call it as it is. For the pharmaceutical industry, it's highly profitable. For the medical industrial complex, is what I call it, healthy people are not profitable. You and I and your listeners do nothing for the health and industrial complex, the established, right? We don't go to the doctor. We don't buy into the BS. We don't purchase any of the commodities that they are offering for profit. We don't need it, right? Ergo, they don't want a whole lot of people like us around.
We're the
it's bad
enemy.
for business. We are
We're
the
enemy. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. This stuff, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Some people think we're just the wackos, and I'm like, this stuff, it's super obvious, and we can touch on this. I did with Dr. Zoe Harcombe. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's amazing. Last episode I released was with her. Hundreds of comments about how great the show was, because we did get into the bigger picture. What are the powers that be? You know, what's going on here? So we should touch on that. But maybe we'll get there later, like we did with Zoe, as we ease into it. But I just wanted to, let people know that you're a freedom fighter. I love surrounding myself with people that get it. And so far, it's like 99% everyone gets it that I come across in the health community. But then, out there in the world, I'm in Austin. There's all these people that 2 years later, they still got their 2-year-olds in masks outside. It's, it breaks my heart, all this type of stuff. So yes, these other people exist. I don't see them. Right. I mean, I see my community, and we're all on the same page, and I love it.
It's a curious dichotomy. I'm in Austin too. We just got back to Austin. Michelle and I are semi-nomadic. We travel the country in our RV, which is kind of why my background looks, if people are going, wait, is that a water filter behind them? We are in an RV, and in fact, it is a water filter. But yeah, coming back to being in Greater Texas, which is where we were most of the last few months. We traveled out west up to southern Utah, had a great time. But in what I would call Greater Texas is totally different than what Austin is, right? I mean, it's the rest of Texas is back to normal. And for the most part, Austin is back to normal. And there's still pockets where you kind of dive in and you're like, what? What's going on here? I mean, it's curious. And I think that really tends to show you how information is compartmentalized, right? And we can get into this whole thing too about it. Everybody lives in a bubble right now. Not just you and I happen to live in a healthy bubble, right? So the people we interact with, the information that we are given is for the most part geared towards us, right? So when you break out of that bubble and go into another person's sphere who has been exposed to a different barrage of information, their worldview is completely different. And from a psychological standpoint, it's super curious to look. And I am if nothing else, I mean, I cut my teeth back in the day in psychology and political science. I mean, that was my go-to. So I find this stuff super, super interesting.
It is. I mean, it basically is a big experiment in human psychology, like what happened in the last 2 years. And it's just funny. You're right. It's the bubbles, because I'm from Hawaii. I go back there, my brother, my friends, some of them back there, they don't know what's going on outside their bubble. I'm showing them videos the entire time in Texas. It was open. Like we were out, like there's crowded bars, clubs, every time. Yeah. There's no mask mandates, no vax mandates, none of this. Every weekend, packed house, no problem. No, there was no problem. Texas did better than most states in, whatever the outcomes were. And they just don't get it. Their brain doesn't compute. They just don't even know how to answer it, because they're just in their bubble, and they're like, well, we're here, we're being safe. We're doing all the rules. I'm like, yeah, that's just your bubble. This is not the reality. Right. That's just your perception.
And I'm telling you, it is a mass experiment on human psychology. When you know the way the game is played, when you know the inside the way the game is played, if you've studied, and propaganda is a trigger word, I get, but that is manipulation. If you understand how manipulation works, whether it's through advertising, whether it's through marketing, whether it is through up and up propaganda, the rules are the same. Influence, same thing. And these truisms have been known since the days of Edward Bernays. This is like World War I era. Bernays was Freud's nephew, I believe it was. So he cut his teeth in psychology, and he was essentially a front man for the ad, the fledgling ad business at that time. Advertise, and they wanted to know, how can we make ads effective? He said, you want to know how to make ads effective? I'll tell you. Boom, and he laid out the blueprint, and that blueprint got refined over time, and let me tell you, it is freaking effective. You can topple political regimes with this. This is what was used during the communist revolution in China. This is Mao's Little Red Book. He pretty much took it from Bernays, refined it, put a communist spin on it, and it became Mao's Little Red Book. It's the same thing. It's the same process. And the process is really very easy. It's scary easy, in fact.
It is. I'll point people to Yuri Besmanov. So he's an ex-KGB agent.
Right.
He talks about this and how Russia used it, and these subversion tactics. And yes, it is the same playbook, and it's been used forever. And I love it. So you can find it on YouTube. He's done like 1.5-hour presentations, and he goes through it all. He defected, he escaped to Canada, and then eventually made it to the US. And it's about subversion. And it's about, there's just techniques and how people work, and fear is involved. And what I like is he says these KGB agents, they're not running around doing like karate moves and blowing up bridges. You know what I mean? Like, that's in the movies. What they're actually doing is subversion. Like the lion's share of it is controlling populations through different methods of psychology. No bombs, no bridges, just psychological warfare.
And he's spot on. He is spot on. And so the advantage that the propagandist has, the massive advantage that the propagandist has, is even those who are aware of how the propaganda game is played, they're aware. Their first thought is, yeah, but it can't happen to me because I'm a strong individual, which is, I'm going to tell you, right, which is laughable. And I'll give you an example here in just a minute, but it's laughable until you fully dive in and learn the rules of the game and how the manipulation game is played. Then you can begin to pick out the pieces. And then you can begin to go, oh, I see what you're doing there. Okay, cool. Nice. Oh, I see what you're doing there. Nice try. Like, that's, yes. So I will watch political speeches, not because I really care, left, right, whatever. I think they're two sides of the same shitty coin.
Yes, exactly.
But I will watch these speeches because they are masters at the manipulation game. They have been taught well. That's why they are where they are. All things else considered, they are masters at some angle of that game. And they all play different roles and fit in different roles, but they are a master at the manipulation game and the speech game. And if you go through and you know what you're looking at, and you listen to these speeches, you're just like, wow. I mean, that is, yes.
Persuasion.
Incredible.
And there's persuasion. I never got into NLP, but I know you got into NLP. Is that what you're talking about?
Totally. And this is where NLP gets a bad rap, because NLP is manipulation. Yes, it absolutely is. Can a used car salesman use NLP? Absolutely. And it can also be used for personal transformation. This is the way Michelle and I use it. So we have a personal coaching business, and we use a large portion of our modality does come from NLP. So that's a manipulation in another kind of way. This person wants to transform their lives. We have an agreed upon outcome. Now we are going to use these techniques in full light on them and get them to where they want to go. That is manipulation too. That's the bright side of NLP. I tell people all the time, NLP is like money. When people are like, I can't believe you study NLP, that, manipulative, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, NLP is like money. Money can be used for evil. Absolutely. We see it every day. And it can be used for incredible good. How are you going to use it? Right? Do you trust yourself with money? I trust myself with money and NLP because I know that I'm going to leverage it in the right way. And so in that way, they are very similar. Yeah.
It's all about, it's your intentions. And so it's neuro-linguistic programming. Maybe just give a quick high-level view of what it is.
Sure. So in neuro-linguistic programming, essentially, so it's two big things. Number one, it is the study of the modeling of excellence. So the gentleman who created the NLP idea, Richard Bandler and Jim Grinder, they got into this because they wanted to study. This was back in the 70s. They wanted to study why there was a few therapists in the psychological therapy realm that stood out far and above everybody else with their results. Like you have, a group of therapists, it kind of falls on a bell curve. You have some that aren't effective at all. You have the middle of the road, and you had these outliers out to the other side who were freaking incredible. But when they asked these people what it was that they did, they couldn't explain it. They're like, well, I just do my thing and it works. And it was driving Bandler and Grinder. They're like, no, you're doing something. Mm-hmm. And so what they came to realize was it was at the subconscious level. They were doing things they didn't even realize they were doing. That were really, and so they studied this, deconstructed it, and then put together methodologies that most people could use to get superior results. So that's one part of NLP. It's a study of mastery and how to deconstruct mastery, which, by the way, is also used in things like major league batting coaches, right? You look at the top batters in the major league, if you were to ask them, why is it that I don't know, I swing a bat. That's, mm-hmm. I go up to the plate, I do my thing, and I swing a bat consistently. They can't tell you what they do, but a good batting coach can deconstruct. So that's modeling excellence. The other part of it is the study of the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind is the powerhouse. We like to think that we're conscious beings walking around making conscious decisions all the time during the day, and you're anything but. You are 95 to 99% unconscious of your actions. Now you're walking around, you're doing all the things, you're creating your life, you're having these outcomes. You think it's the conscious actions that are doing that. It's not. They are subconscious actions, and we operate with loops in our minds of stories in our subconscious minds that we hit replay. That is how we operate. Now NLP goes in and it's like, okay, well, if that's true, and if the subconscious mind is that powerful, A, how do we talk to the subconscious mind? And B, how do we change the stories? If something's limiting us, how do we change the story into something that helps us along, gets us over this roadblock? So there's two. It's identifying what's limiting, and it gives you tools and techniques to go in and change the story that the subconscious mind is playing. And along the way, there's different tips and techniques of communication, because communication is key when you're working with another person. And therein lies the manipulation side of it. So if you know how the subconscious mind works and you know how to get into a person's subconscious mind, you have the power then to be able to insert, we call it installing. You can pretty much install anything you want. This is what politicians do with political speeches. This is what propaganda does. Without your being aware of it, it sets you up and just insert. That's the manipulative side of it. So it's two sides of the same coin. It's the money example again. Money can be used for good. Money can be used for evil. NLP can be used for good, and NLP can be used for manipulation and propaganda.
And so that's what we've seen in the past couple of years. That's what we've
seen, yeah.
Oh man, but this stuff's super interesting. So I've never got into NLP stuff myself. My friends around Austin have. I actually had a mentor as my first job. I think he was kind of into it because you mentioned stories. It's all so much of our life and reality is stories we tell ourselves or stories that go on in our mind. And I realized that it is. That's what it is. But I was thinking about that in the health world is like I'm telling myself that I'm the story that I'm a healthy person, that I work out, that I eat well, and that everything I'm doing. And that's one of my biggest really assets I have going for me because so many people don't even have that. And so they're just on this whole nother path. And I think to stay consistent with my lifestyle, it's because I'm telling myself that story.
Yes, that's absolutely true. It is absolutely true because, again, 95 to 99% of the time, you are operating out of the unconscious mind or subconscious. Those two can be interchangeable. So it's not a conscious act for you. It is now a story that you are operating through with your subconscious mind. You're in operation mode. You're just following the loop. That loop happens to work out very, very well for you, right? That is a good story to have on replay. Other people have another story. I'm sick. I'm in fear. I will never be healthy. I'll always be over. All of these stories that got implanted somewhere along the line in their life, these stories can be rewritten. It's just a way, just get into it. And the hard way, I will tell you this, the very, very hard way is willpower. And we all know that willpower is finite. And we all know people who have made changes in their life via willpower. So it does happen. It's rare. It does happen. What generally happens is because we're only operating consciously a small sliver of time, that's the only time we're able to utilize willpower. That's it. The rest of the time we're on that story of I'm sick, I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm whatever that story is that keeps them down. And as an aside, if anyone is in Austin, and I'm just going to drop a Deb and Brandon Yeager are the absolute best trainers that I know in this realm. I've met trainers in other areas of expertise outside of NLP because that's what Michelle and I do. We're constantly going to workshops and finding speakers for Payloaf X. Their subject matter mastery of this subject is beyond anything I've ever seen, and their ability to deliver and teach is superior. So I just put that out there.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, if you're interested, that's probably
and let me just say, and we wrote this in Primal Alchemy. You don't have to go to Deb and Brandon, you don't have to study NLP, whatever. But if you want to master your life, you have to master communication of your subconscious mind. That is what it boils down to. Seriously, if I had to put it in one nutshell, that's it.
I think some people do that without even knowing it. So the successful people are the ones that, so they don't have to take an official NLP course. They just have figured out a way to do that without knowing it. And
this, by the way, would be going back to modeling excellence, right? There's somebody who's done it that can't even spell NLP, right? So they're just like, whatever. Yeah. My life is rocking. I do what I want, How do you do that? I guarantee you in some form or fashion, they have figured out how to speak directly to their subconscious mind and be able to create change at that level. They might go through it through a different path. It might be totally different than NLP, but that's what they're doing.
Well, yeah. So I'll say what this guy said to me, this mentor guy, 12 years ago. No, 15 years ago. I'm getting old. My first job was 15 years ago. So he said this example was, if you get cut off in traffic, all that matters is how you react to that. And it's a story you're telling yourself. So it's either I'm going to get pissed off. I'm yelling at this guy. This guy's an idiot. He's rude. And then that will affect you. It's all how you react. The same thing happened. All that happened is one guy moved in front of you in a vehicle and nothing really happened. You were still fine. So the other thing is you could say, oh, well, this guy, he's probably really late to work. Maybe something went wrong and he's like desperate to get to work. And I'm glad that he got in front of me, and that's it. Because the same thing happened. You have two reactions to it. That stuck with me for 15 years. I've never taken NLP. I don't even know what course he took, but that's how I always think about it.
Right. And each of those, by the way, is a story. Because we really don't know what the guy, who knows what, maybe there's it could have been, a completely different thing that was actually going on. But your interpretation was two different stories. What story serves you in that moment? The story that you're going to get all bent out of shape and, you're going to blow a heart valve because does that story serve, or does the one serve that's like, I get it, man, I've been there, bro. I hear you. Come on in.
Come on in. Yeah, I love that. And I think it did change the course of my life. And I also want to come back to your willpower thing, because I love talking about that stuff, because it's a good example of why some certain diets work, or like the calorie counting story. I love talking about calories, how calorie counting is so dumb because yes, you can lose weight through sheer willpower by just eating the same bad foods, but eating less of them. It's not going to work long term. You're relying on willpower. It sucks. You're not getting your nutrients and protein.
Mhm.
It's never going to work. It's not going to serve your body. It's mathematically impossible to be as healthy as the way you and I eat because
Right.
we're eating for protein and nutrients. Basically, when you get down to it, we're going into this in the film. We're trying to break down. It's like if you just eat the same food but less of it, you're just getting less protein and nutrients, which are the building blocks, as well as less calories. So yes, maybe you may lose some body fat temporarily, but that doesn't help your health, and it's never going to work long term.
Right. And I think, one of the truths that I know about this world is that nature has all the answers. So if you look to nature, in every living organism that lives on Earth that we know of, maximizes nutrient density and what it can take in. That's it. And that is super smart. Why? Because why would it be any other way? Why would you not try to maximize nutrient density? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you expend more energy than you had to in the pursuit of what you're taking in? Right? Because it's a reproductive thing, right? I got to have energy to reproduce. We got to keep the line going. It just makes sense in nature that be the case. Now,
This is, well, sorry.
go ahead.
'Cause I got excited because I was thinking about the book Eat Like the Animals. I'm thinking about Dr. Ted Naiman, Protein Leverage Hypothesis, because Robin Hyburn and Simpson, the authors of the book Eat Like the Animals, talk about this stuff. I mentioned Ted. I try to mention. I have certain things people will notice in my podcast. I always like to mention Weston Price and his journey, and Dr. Ted. Anyway, the book is about all the studies that have been done, like you're saying, all across nature. They'd started in insects and they moved their way up to bigger mammals to humans, that they all eat for a certain amount of protein, basically. And protein and nutrients come hand in hand. But if you dilute their food with a whole bunch of extra energy, basically if you have dog food, right, that's like high, refined carbs with like low protein, the dog will just eat more of it to get the same amount of nutrients and protein.
That's that's ultimately the key to it. And you can do all kinds of thought experiments, and people will say, and they're true, well, people live all over the world. True, they do live all over the world. We have figured out, because we're humans, how to live in very diverse places. And still, given the environment that the human is in, it is still maximizing nutrient density as that environment can provide it.
It's exactly.
The American Plains Indians did not jump into farming tomatoes. They ran buffalo, massive herds of buffalo. I'm a big student of the Comanche Indians here in Texas, just because of my lineage, and there's a lot involved there. But those people, what an amazing life. Their life was follow the buffalo herd. And they built an entire culture around that. They weren't messing around with pulling something out of the ground unless it was medicinal. They were dropping buffalo, and that's nutrient density for the least amount of expenditure.
And eating the whole animal nose to tail.
Yes, exactly, because that made sense, right? The animal's already dropped, right? Less energy to eat what is there and utilize what's there versus going out and dropping another animal.
Well, and then you could look at the other cultures too. So some people like to point to the Kitavans, or even the Okinawans are more recent. These different populations, there's like the Simane, there's the Tokulawans, there's all these people that in their environment, but they're fit, they're healthy. Well, the commonality is they don't have chronic disease, and they live well, and they're healthy, and all that stuff. And they do have different environments. So yes, they do have to maybe rely on more things they have to dig out of the ground. So they're digging up tubers,
and
they're eating sweet potatoes, but they're also eating fish. They're eating like pork. They're, with Okinawa, they're eating whatever they have that maximizes nutrient density, and they're doing well.
And that's another thought experiment, right? What if your protein sources were limited and you had to grow something? What would you grow? You'd probably grow some kind of a tuber, right? Something heavy and something quick growing and something more nutrient dense. I mean, and then you get into, because humans can do this, division of labor, people can gather, cool, that can be going on. It all fits, and we're tribal. So there's a lot more going on with humans because of our mental capacity and our ability to communicate and all this. But we still don't fall out of the laws of nature. We're still animals, right? And we still operate by those laws. And all of that to say too is, I love everybody, and I respect everybody's model of the world. And if you want to be a vegetarian, cool. I mean, it's not that's not on me. I would just ask you to question these things, right? Your ability to be a vegetarian is predicated on a lot of support structure in your environment to enable you to do that. If that support structure were not there, I don't think you'd last real long on that diet. Just my personal observation.
Exactly. And well, you should consider that, because how a being has evolved over time, and that their environment, it matters. So yes,
Yeah.
like you can hack something and do something that's incongruent with your environment, which is basically what veganism or vegetarianism is. It relies on big mats and containers, being shipped
Right.
around the world. But yeah, you should be suspicious of that. Like, it can't be good for my biology if it wasn't natural for most of my time
Right.
on Earth.
Totally. And I mean, and I think that, if we look at zoo animals and we go, oh, well, there's something going on with the zoo animal. It's not as healthy as its brethren that are out in the wild. Why would that be? Well, its environment is different. And I would venture to say its food is vastly different. I mean, we get it in animals while we're eating Twinkies and wondering what's wrong with our health. I mean, it's like, it's the craziest disconnect, right? It's like, oh, we're an animal too. And oh, we are essentially living in a human zoo. That's interesting, and we are eating foods that we're not designed to eat necessarily, and we're living in an environment that we're not designed to live in. And so how do we manage all of that without going back to the cave and spear? And maybe going back to the cave and spear is cool with some people. I kind of like some modern conveniences. So I'm finding a way to meld the two, which I know you are too. That's part of living in a very, very advanced society while still being able to keep, in the other side of your mind, being able to keep the needs of the human animal that this human package is running around in. And that's the chassis, right? So we have to honor the chassis while we're enjoying this technological playground as best we can.
Well, you have to find that balance. And I love that. That human zoo is something I wanted to bring up because you mentioned your book. And it's also what I've come to realize at the highest level or the lowest level. If you're going the deepest possible, what's our problem? It's that incompatibility of the modern environment with what our bodies need, right? And this is kind of well established. There's a million books about it that you and I've read. I've enjoyed reading your book because you reference all the same people that I love,
Right.
and and book, even The Story of the Human Body, the guy wrote that, who I don't know who really coined this stuff, like the mismatch theory and stuff, right?
Yeah,
That are
the environmental mismatch. Yeah, it's incredible.
environmental mismatch.
Yeah.
That's all
And
it is. But it's like, we're not saying go get a spear and live in a cave, but it's like, how do you navigate the modern world with these ancestral principles? That's what sapien is. That's sort of like my version of paleo, is like, this is the evolved version. It's just like, well, how do we live in a modern day as ancient humans?
right.
But
I mean, and I think, and you do the best you can, right, with what you have. For instance, today I was on this is a run up to Payloaf X. We are on either phone or computer from the time we get up to the time we get. It's just the nature of the business, especially in the run up. A little bit earlier, I was on a Zoom call. I was walking outside barefoot on the grass doing my Zoom call because I was starting to feel, oh man, I need to get some ground, but I got to be I don't have to do anything. I choose to be on a call. Right. So, okay, how am I? And that was just in the moment. Okay, well, barefoot right out here in the grass, I can walk around while I'm on the call. And, is that the best? No, absolutely. It's not the best. The best would be for me to shut everything down and go down the street to Barton Springs and take the day off. Right. That would be the best. I choose not for that to happen because I want to put on a show in a few weeks. So, in between those two extremes, I can find something that is doable. And I think that, again, if you're at the point where you have this story loop in your mind, it makes it very easy to make these decisions, in the moment decisions.
Cause yeah, it's just, well, it becomes second nature. Well, it becomes very
second nature.
subconscious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Like, this
Yeah.
is how
So
I live.
now, for most people, I'm sure that they were like, "What the hell is that guy? Is he like walking around barefooted, holding his computer talk?" I could care less. I mean, that's cool, right on. Yes, I am walking around barefooted, holding my computer, talking
Yeah.
into it.
Well, that's good. Got to get that vitamin D too.
Hell yeah.
Well, let's back up. Let's talk about your book, because I told you before we started. Obviously, well, there's a lot of personal stuff to you and Michelle, but I feel like I could have written that book, and I mean that as a compliment. It's like we are very much on the same page. You're speaking my language, so yeah. Maybe you can even start with your journey too, because everyone has their health journey, and that gives us some
Right.
good context.
Well, where to start? It's been a very, very long road. As it pertains to Payloaf X, I think I could start in the pit of the pits, is where the story starts. So I remember so very, very vividly Michelle and I standing on our driveway one evening when a local minister informed us that our daughter had died in an auto accident. And that memory is burned into my mind. Now go back a couple of years. Michelle and I at this time, this is 2007, 2008 timeframe. Michelle and I are corporate warriors. I mean, we have fully bought into the American dream. We're both working class kids who, quote unquote, made it. And at this point in our lives, I am working for the pharmaceutical industry, of all places. You can't make this stuff up, Brian, I'm telling you. I'm working for the pharmaceutical industry, and I am a liaison between the FDA and the pharmaceutical manufacturing companies. There's a quality control interface between those two entities. And Michelle is essentially working for Starbucks in the capacity of building brand new Starbucks entities up and down the East Coast. That's what she's doing. And I don't mind telling people that we were rolling. I mean, we were banking. We had the massive house. We had the big cars. Kids were in the best schools. We were rolling, and we were empty inside, and we could not figure out why. It was a hungry ghost thing. We could not be satisfied. More money, that didn't do it. Bigger house, that didn't do it. Another Porsche, that didn't do it. And we could not figure out why. So when we were told Brittany died, this was at kind of the bottom of Michelle and I had decided we were going to bail on corporate America, and we were going to go do something. We didn't know what we were going to do. My background in something that I did very, very naturally was train. I could weight train, athletic training. I had been in that realm. I stayed in that realm even after I left college. Was always connected to that realm. I knew this stuff inside and out, and I knew I could train. So my idea was, okay, cool, I'm going to open gyms. Michelle was a self-trained chef. So we had the idea. We didn't know what exactly we were going to do, but we were going to go to Austin, Texas, because we're from this general area and we've always loved Austin. And Austin was at that time and still is like the hub of entrepreneurship, especially when it comes to tech and health and wellness. Another step in that path right before Brittany died was the 2008 housing crisis. The 2008 housing crisis died, and we immediately lost every bit of money that we had saved up for exiting said corporate America gigs. I mean, everything. We lost everything. And then we lost a daughter. So Brittany was she was in college. She was just getting ready to graduate. She was 22 years old. She was a music ministry major. So she was going to a Christian school in Georgia. All of that is to say she had gifts and she lifted humanity. And that was her calling. When Brittany passed, we had it in our minds. We didn't know what we were going to do, but we wanted to create a legacy for Brittany that would change people's lives. But we didn't know We didn't know what that was. It was just a seed that was in our mind. So we went on. I opened gyms. Michelle starts a catering company. Then in 2011, we go to the inaugural Ancestral Wellness show that was in Los Angeles that year.
Mm-hmm.
That
Ancestral
show,
Health Symposium?
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, AHS. That was the inaugural show in 2011. I spoke at that show on training, some aspect of training. I can't even remember what it was now. But on the plane from LA back to Austin, we kind of deconstructed things, and we said, that was a great show, but what do we think was missing from that show? And from our opinion, it was very, very academic, cool. There was a lot of science provided, but it didn't accurately bridge to the layperson. And we were working with lay people, right? So we were like, there's got to be some kind of a bridge, some kind of an event that's a bridge between the academia and the common person. The rubber meets the road. There were people out there who could utilize this, but they don't know how because there's no bridge. And we thought maybe they should be the bridge. Maybe they should shift to that. And we're like, well, no, that's not their thing. Their thing is actually to be an academic conference. Mm-hmm. And then we thought, well, who could do that? And we kind of looked at each other and said, maybe we should do that. And we literally on the back of a napkin created the blueprint of what Payloaf X would be a few months later in 2012. That first event drew about 800 people, which blew our minds. It was way more than we thought were going to show up. And then in 2019, which was the last show we had before COVID shut everything down, we had 8,500. So that's how fast it grew. And it was and is still a legacy to Brittany. She changed lives through music ministry. And Michelle and I, we're not blessed with prophecy, and we are definitely not musicians. So we changed the world in our way, right? And this is our legacy to her. I mean, and so it is way more. And I know this goes well beyond answering your question, but this entity is not just a business for us. It is a legacy for her to change lives. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My story is a bit similar. I'll do my quick recap. I lost both my parents at around 30 to these kind of modern chronic diseases that people think are normal. And then, my version of that, well, one is change my own health. And maybe you can talk about your personal health transformation. But I changed my health, and then my version to affect the world in a bigger way was to make the film. So everyone knows that it's been 4.5 years of me filming this, turned into a 6-part series now. And
totally.
Yeah, I think it's going to be amazing when we're finally done. Should be by the end of this year. But I just made a few changes in my diet, and my whole body composition changed. My allergies went away, joint pain went away, all kinds of stuff went away. What about you?
So, for Michelle really had the transformation. I really didn't have a big transformation. I was one of the lucky few who, at that time, I was eating more what you would consider probably more of a bodybuilder diet. So I was skewing more high protein, but it had nothing to do with health. Nothing. It was all performance based, totally performance based. And I knew how body composition could be manipulated by fluctuating carbohydrates in and out of the system. For instance, at the time I was working with a wrestling coach. And obviously in wrestling, you start cutting carbs, the whole thing to drop down and make so within sporting community, especially weight class sporting communities, the idea that carbohydrate manipulation can cause weight to fluctuate wildly. By the way, it's been known since the 50s. I mean, this is not new knowledge. Now, the nutritional side of it and the health benefits, I was completely unaware of until at one point, back in the dial-up days, I ran into this guy named Rob Wolf online. Mm-hmm. and I at the time I was looking for documentation with a wrestling coach I was working with as to, I wanted to try an experiment where he would keep his wrestlers at a more consistent body weight throughout the entire year and into the season. And wrestling is very traditional, obviously, and that was verboten. You didn't freaking do that. Everybody dropped weight, to get in. And obviously the problem is you drop weight that severely, you drop strength. So now you have two guys at a lower weight class who are wrestling against you, and neither of them are in optimal strength. So anyway, long story short, they had a horrible year. The year that I came in, I was like, hey, what do you got to lose? Let's try this. I mean, you're 0 and whatever. I mean, what there's no further down you could go. Let's try this new route. Anyway, he was down with it, but he wanted some documentation. I was looking for documentation to give him, ran into Rob Wolf, and the conversation totally skewed into, gluten intolerance. And I was like, what the hell is gluten intolerance? I haven't even heard of this. And as he's coming back, we're messaging back and forth. I'm, all these symptomologies he's shooting me. I'm looking at Michelle and going, I'm like, and her specialty at that time was Italian, right? So she's constantly with and she was good, let me tell you. But she had all of these issues, fibromyalgia, and these unexplained weight gain, and these aches and pains that were just like wherever. And as he's giving me these symptomologies, I'm like going, well, I don't really have a whole lot of that, but I think I know someone who does. And so anyway, I went on essentially a paleo diet, really didn't see a whole lot of change, to tell you the truth. I mean, I felt great. But I was, my exercise program at that time, I was still young enough to where that was kind of offsetting anything I might've been doing through diet. But it took a while to finally get her on board, right? Because, it's funny now when I talk about this, because she's like the paleo queen and the evangelist. At that time back then, she'll tell you this. She was like, I think you're like certifiably crazy. You want me to quit doing Italian food and homemade pastas and all this and eat because you think that's going to make me feel better. She was very dubious early on, but she finally got to the point where she was hurting so bad. She's like, look, I'll give anything a try, whatever. You and this kook Rob Wolf, whatever, if you think this will work. And it wasn't a weekend. She was like, what? Mm-hmm. I mean, she was, and then a paleo evangelist was born then. She was like, I cannot believe what I eat affected me that much. And she goes, why did my doctor not the same, right? Why did my doctor not tell me this? He puts me on all these prescriptions, but never once mentioned diet. And it's the same old story, right? That we've heard a million times. And that's her story. I mean, it is. And anyway, that's how we came to the health and wellness side of things. And that eventually, with everything else, dovetailed into Payloaf X. And that's how we came into this sphere.
That's great. And I should say, I'm going to put a link in the show notes for tickets for Payloaf X. I'm going to be there. I'm super excited. Yeah, I was there in the 2019 one. So I guess it was 2.5 years ago. Or almost 3, actually. Never mind, 3.
It will be almost 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years ago. Amazing. It blew my mind because I've only been to the smaller conferences. And man, so much fun. It was in Austin. It was so cool. I just realized I did a video with Mark Sisson, Sean Baker, and Paul Saladino, and it was born from Payloaf X. We were all standing together. I'm like, how cool is this that us 4 standing here, we're hanging out, and then we made this plan to shoot this video, and then it actually happened. So people can find that on my YouTube.
I'm telling you, that hearing stories like that, or what, in transformation stories, yes, personal transformation stories, but stories of people randomly meeting, coming together, taking a picture. Oh, hey, this would be cool, and doing a video, and in those ways changing the world. All of the trickle down, all of the chance meetings that take place there, all of the new companies that will be born, because it happens every year. New partnerships, new companies, new ideas. I love that aspect of the show. Totally love it.
It is. And sometimes when there's these conferences, I'm like, is it worth it for me to go, or I have to book the ticket and fly there? And every single time it's like this, how could I not have gone? There's always been some connections, any conference too. We're not just talking about Payloaf X.
Sure.
Although Payloaf X is kind of the biggest one, but yes, all the ones I've been to, Metabolic Health Summit where we met, all that stuff.
Right.
It's always worth it. It's incalculable how much benefit and like connections you have.
It totally is. And, people ask all the time, is the ticket price worth it? Because I mean, it's not cheap, but, by any means. And I'm like, is your health worth it? Number one, I say it is. And number two, I mean, one meeting with one person can totally change the trajectory of your life, your health life, your financial life, your love life, even. I mean, is it worth it? Hell yeah, it's worth it.
Oh, I've seen
Yes,
careers made at these type of shows.
totally.
Yeah. Where it's like, oh,
Totally.
and
Yes.
then I see later, I'm like, oh, this, because I met them and then I saw them connect and then like they have a business together now. It's
Right.
crazy.
So it happens all the time, but you have to be there for that to happen. I mean, those things don't happen in a vacuum. You have to put yourself out there. You have to take massive action, get to the show, and yes, come to Payloaf X. I am asking you to come to Payloaf X. And just in life in general, you have to put yourself out there and make something happen. I mean, that's
Oh man.
life 101.
I know. Well, I'll be there. I'll be seeing people. So come say hi. You'll see me there. You'll see Keith there.
Hell yeah,
Uh,
you will.
all right. So you told us the sort of health story. When did you get sort of, I call it red pilled. I don't
Yeah,
know if people know red pilled to be, the Matrix reference, but on the other side of things that we alluded to
right,
earlier, when did you kind of wake up to the rest of the world? Because I'll just say, people in the health sphere are all on the same page, like I said. But
right.
what I think it's because you see through all the dietary guidelines are bogus, all the big food companies bogus, marketing bogus, healthcare/sick care, all
Right.
bogus. So you see through it all. And then there's a certain point when you see through the rest of the world. When was that for
Yeah.
you?
So for me, it came very, very early on. It came in little bits and pieces at first, and then it kind of hit a crescendo. So really quick. So I was in the military for 9 years. I went to college on a football scholarship. Long story short, played a few years of college football, had a devastating knee injury, had to back out. Knee healed up perfectly, but I lost a step. And at that level of college football, losing a step means you go from starting to you're kind of a nobody real
Mhm,
quick. I mean,
mhm,
real quick. And they've
mm,
got three other guys standing in line waiting to take your job, just waiting for you. So, I mean, it's a very cutthroat thing. I loved my time doing that. It is cutthroat. Once you're done, you are done. I mean, done.
yeah.
So I was like, okay, I got to figure out what I'm going to do here. This piece of me is no longer. So I shifted focus and went into the military, which still offered me the ability to be quote unquote in a boys club, to do, cool things, and which I did. One of the very cool things I did was I went to a school that was called, and I can't remember the exact name of the school, but it was essentially evasion tactics. So if you happen to be taken prisoner of war, or in some way captured, in some way taken over by the enemy, and the enemy
Mhm,
was trying to extract information out of you, what were the techniques that they were going to use to get information out of you? What was going to happen? And so the school is built on what the military had learned from what had happened in Korea and what had happened in Vietnam. How the prisoners of war, we've all seen videos of like American prisoners of war, like giving, the Declaration of Allegiance to Vietnam, or to say that America was wrong for being in
mm,
Vietnam. And in all of the political aspect of war aside, all of that aside, one would ask the question, how did they go from being fully supportive of American intervention to that? How did that happen? That was the question that was answered in this school.
mm,
And let me tell you how they did it. They did it with mind control and propaganda techniques. They did it with NLP, looking back on it now. It's the same playbook. The same playbook that can be used on you individually can be used in mass. It's the same thing. You take in a prisoner, create confusion. First thing. I don't know whether it's night or day. I don't know where the other people are. I don't know what's going on here. My schedule is all messed up. Create fear. Those are the two big ones. uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, fear.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to that school, we knew what was going to go on. We knew exactly what was going to go on. And you go in thinking, well, I know what's going to go on. I'm going to be totally immune. This is going to be a cakewalk. Whew, this is a week off, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Within hours, you will crack. And within even knowing what the techniques are.
Wow.
That is how powerful this stuff is. And so when I went through that school and I saw these techniques, I was like, well, that's interesting. That can be used. And that really started to pique my interest. And then when I got up, into corporate America and kind of rose up a ways in the pharmaceutical industry, I was like, I think this entire industry is full of shit. I think this is all smoke and mirrors game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was my other peak. And I'm like, well, if that's smoke and mirrors, right about the same time, I'm having these conversations with Rob Wolf, and then now I'm starting to dive into the diet side. And I'm like, why is the government giving out information that's like 180 degrees wrong? I mean, you can't get more wrong than this.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get more wrong than what they are promoting. They are promoting ill health. Mm-hmm. Why is it? And so it was this question. That is why we are so big on this book about championing critical thought, because unless you hone the skill to ask the question, why, you will just be bamboozled, and they will bulldoze you, brother. They will bulldoze you, because in their eyes, and I'll be very blunt here, in their eyes, we are no more than a manipulable profit center. That is it. And I hate, people are like, dude, that's pretty rough. And I'm like, tell me otherwise.
I called this Rugrats with Dr. Zoe Harcombe. I'm like, they're like the principal, and then we're just a Rugrats they have to manage. And I'm monetized. I mean, a preschool costs money. It's a daycare center.
Totally. And so, why would they want a healthy population? Number one, a healthy population asks way too many questions, number one. And number two, they're not profitable. We can't make any profit off of them. I mean, people sometimes will call me, dude, you got a very bleak outlook on life. I go, no, I have a freaking rosy outlook on life now, because I know I'm in control. I can see all this BS and I exit out of it. I don't partake in.
Well, that's the red pill part.
That's the red pill part. The bad part is being blue pilled and thinking that you're being taken care of. And I can tell you, you are not, right? The Thanksgiving turkey thinks everything is cool until Thanksgiving morning. Then his neck is on a chopping block.
Oh, right? It's getting fed. It's getting taken care of.
Right. Yeah. Everything's golden until it's not. I would much rather be the wild turkey out fending for myself and living a long, fruitful, vibrant life until I, get sucked up by Lilith the owl or whatever, but, go through a natural cause of death. I do not want to dwindle away slowly. That's not my, and again, I respect everybody's model of the world. I'm just saying, if you want to break free of the human zoo, you've got to A, take responsibility, B, ask the hard questions. And those questions are difficult. It was very difficult for me to realize that, damn, the country that I served for 9 years, risked my life for, they see me as a manipulable profit center. That was hard, right? Mm-hmm. But that was the wake-up call. I'm like, okay, cool. That's the way the game's played. Right on. Cool. And then you go from there.
Well, yeah, it's not a comfortable process. And that's the problem, is everyone wants that comfortable life. And that's why people have this, they're just like going along and it's easy. And I've seen that in so many people, and they have their job and they have their wife. And if they start to question things, it's going to disrupt their entire life. They could risk everything. They could get divorced.
Yeah.
You imagine that. I
totally.
know people very, very personally that if they started questioning things, if they even it's the cognitive dissonance. They don't even they can't accept it. I'm telling them that there's 1,000 people here in Texas that, are doing their thing the whole time. Nothing ever happens. Well, they're just like, I don't buy it. I can't.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my wife. Everything's going to fall apart. This like illusion of this comfortable life.
Right. And that's, again, we can go back to stories, right? That's a story. that everything's, that they're telling themselves that all of, their the entire world is going to unravel. And that's a story it keeps them in that loop, that keeps them trapped. And that story, by the way, is perpetuated by those who wish to perpetuate it, right? That story is just, you get the good side, hey, the American dream, you're given that. And then the bad side, oh, if you don't believe in the American dream, some very bad stuff could happen to you on the other side, financial instability and, all of these boogeymen that are created. And by the way, these boogeymen that are created, we got a savior right over here. It's the U.S. health system. It's, this corporation, it's that corporation. It's a healthcare system. It's whatever. This is manipulation 101. I mean, that's how they set it up. And I get it. When you are in that circle, I think the only thing that really helped Michelle and I back when we woke up was because we were waking up at the same time.
Yeah, you need that.
Both of us were going through it. So we were like, it wasn't one who was waking up trying to shake the other one awake. We just happened to start waking up at the same time. Why? I don't know. That's the way it happened for us. So we never, and I feel pain for people who one partner is waking up and the other one isn't. I get it. I understand. I didn't have to go through that. So I didn't have to walk that path. We had to walk a completely different path, but not that one.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky too. Yeah. A girl helped me through it was actually, mine was just in the beginning of COVID. It just happened to be during the beginning of COVID when I really snapped out of it because things weren't making sense. I was like, wait, what? After like the first week, well, I was never worried because I knew I had my health under my own control and all that stuff. So I was never worried. But then I'm like, wait, so they're still doing, like, my gym's closed still, like the pool's closed. I can't go do my vitamin D, my sun, and my reading at the pool. And it's like been a full year. Well, that's when I left LA. I mean, I was totally out by then. But yeah, I mean, I woke up a lot earlier to that. And yes, it was good to have a partner, this great girl that kind of helped me open my eyes. So I didn't think I was crazy. I thought she was crazy for a while. But
I mean, that's the view when you're caught in it, right? I mean, that is the view, is people who are outside of my view, they are crazy. What? I mean, why would the government want to control you? I mean, why would that? And that's where you start asking the hard questions. And if you can allow yourself to ask questions, even the uncomfortable ones, and what mostly happens is people don't ask the question that there may be an answer that they don't want to hear, right? So they get very crafty at asking certain questions and not others. I'm saying you just need to rip the Band-Aid off and start questioning everything.
Questioning everything. And it's also looking at both sides. It's a thing that I like to talk about because in the nutrition stuff too, I like to question both sides and try to figure out how things work. And I want to disprove my ideas and make sure that I have things figured out correctly. Part of that was even what I was saying, the Kitavans or these different populations that eat a super high carb diet. I'm like, wait, how does that work? How does that work?
Right.
And then by questioning it, I'm like, oh, but they're eating whole foods. They're still getting animal nutrition. They're eating oysters. Like all made sense. They're still getting all the protein and nutrients they need. They're not eating fast food. That's so it does make sense that you could have different ways to work. So you're talking about critical thinking. I think that's so huge. I was lucky enough to go to school in Hawaii, a very good school that taught critical thinking. It's amazing because they actually taught critical thinking. We read A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn.
I have a story about Howard Zinn. Yes. Yeah,
go for it. Well, tell, because it's kind of the opposite narrative. It's like, what did the natives in America think of all these people coming and taking their land?
Yes. So when I was in college, Howard Zinn was a visiting professor, and I actually took a history course under Howard Zinn. It was the most, and I was lucky enough to go to college at a time when critical thinking was pushed. They were really pushed, and I happened to go to a school that was it just out of pure luck. Believe me, I was nobody's academic superstar at that time. I went to school to play football, and that was, in my mind, that was it. But as I got into school, I finally started to flower. I was like, wow, I get to think for myself. I get to actually have an opinion on things. And so I really flowered when I went to college. But yeah, that was for me, who had come up through Texas public education and was taught hook, line, and sinker, right?
Mhm.
The good old American way, and this is the way it is. And to sit in a class with Howard Zinn, who completely flipped that on its head, that was like awakening to me. And I was like, oh, and I apply that to everything. And that really helped me, especially when I got into the pharmaceutical industry. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Right. When my colleagues around me were like, I think you should just shut up and put your head down and keep cashing checks. I mean, that's a smart thing to do. Right.
Mhm.
And I was
Mhm.
like, yeah, no, maybe it's smart, but that's not going to sit with me. I ask too many questions. I'm not. Yeah. So yeah, Howard Zinn is, he was an interesting professor. I'll just say this. He was a character.
Well, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
very few people are taught to think about things critically and yeah,
Yeah.
like really question things. And that's why I think the censorship is such a big deal. We don't have too much time left, but man,
Right.
the censorship stuff is insane. Like that's the exact opposite of critical thinking. It's just trust the science. Like that's like their
Totally.
slogan.
And here's another thing. So we at Payloaf X have been hamstrung because our email client server has shadow banned us, right?
Mm.
And they do this without letting you know, right? And it's,
Wow.
I mean, so we're cruising along when we finally find out we can have the show. We have a short runway to put on the show. We finally got word from Austin that we could do a completely unrestricted show. That's what we were waiting for. We're like, we're not doing any testing. We're not doing any mandates whatsoever. No, we're not going to have a show. So they finally come back to us right before South by Southwest this year, say you can have a completely unrestricted show. Cool.
Nice.
South by Southwest took that information and did what they did. They instituted COVID testing, whatever. They can do whatever they want. We will be the first show in Austin that is the first large show that is completely unrestricted. So if for no other reason, come for that. It's a show of support.
I love it.
But we were to get the word out. Obviously, we went to our email list, and we could not figure out why our open rates were so abysmal. So we dug, did some triangulation, did some work. Come to find out, we've been shadow banned. So
Wow.
we're trying to navigate that one to a different email client server. If anyone knows this game, you have to warm up your list. You can't just blast 100,000 person list right out of the gate. You got to warm them up in groups of like 500, which is agonizing. We're like, we got a show in a couple weeks and we can't get the word out. So, part of interacting so much is just getting the word out, letting people know this show is going on, because these are the forces working against us, right? You have the censorship on one side where try to post anything alternative to Facebook, any kind of alternative, you will get, and believe me, because this has happened too, you will get thrown in Facebook prison immediately. Try to run a alternative healthcare conference and not talk about alternative healthcare and try to get that word out. That is the way the playing field has been leveled. Do a Google search for any kind of alternative health versus a Google search or versus a search in like DuckDuckGo. You get two totally, completely outcomes. I wonder why that is. Right? The algorithm is written against us who are trying to get out alternative health or alternative to the establishment points of view. I'm not saying you have to agree with us at all. I want you to choose your own path, but you need information to choose from, right? If you don't have the full spectrum of information, how can you ever make an informed decision? So these forms of censorship exist, and they are heavy out there. Heavy. I'm telling you, from a business owner who has been banned in all kinds of ways in the last 2 years, that's trying to put out a message that is only meant to help optimize human optimization. That's what we're about. To try to get that message out in today's day and age, which should be the easiest time ever in history. It's actually one of the hardest times.
It is. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, we have the internet. We have open information. It should be, yes, everyone should know all about paleo or sapien or anything.
Sure.
They don't. And it's blocked. And I know so many people, completely kicked off of the internet, completely canceled off all platforms. I got shadow banned. I've gotten my posts removed. I got a strike on YouTube. I've gotten it all too. I know this stuff is real. I mean, so many stories.
It's
It's
really,
so
yeah.
frustrating, and I don't even know what to do. And I've had to even self-censor because of that. I've
Hmm.
been disheartened of even trying to spread this message because I'm just kind of like, what's the point? Or I'm risking everything. I don't know. The powers that be, whatever you want to call it, the establishment, I like calling it the establishment, is they just have so much control. Like, people just don't understand that level of control they have because they think it's impossible to control things at that level. And I'm saying that humans are always controlled at that level. There's the same power dynamics always. I said this with Zoe. It's like, that's why I brought up the preschool. There's a
Right.
power dynamic from the Rugrats to the teachers to the principal. It's the same thing in all systems up
And
to like.
I'll tell you the key when people say, people at the top can't control, they can, because they're really not controlling. You are controlling yourself.
Mm.
That is the key to it. That is the whole message behind Primal Uprising. You hold the keys to your own freedom. You hold the keys, and they know that. Now they're
They're just
doing,
trying
now
to
what they
hide that
do,
info. Yeah.
they hide that info. So do they control? Yes, but you are largely patrolling your own, yourself, and in your community. And they set the rules of the game up so they pit one against the other, one against the other. Republican versus Democrat, black versus white, gun owners versus not gun owners. And they
Hmm.
constantly are pitting the populace against themselves. Guess who's never pitted against anybody? Those at the
Them.
top.
Yeah.
Those at the top. All they do is they just keep seeding, inserting. That's the way the
Well,
game is played, and that's how they can control so easily.
and it's called the Hegelian dialectic,
It
where it's like you
is.
have the two opposites. So yes, it's
Yes.
a Republican versus Democrat, but the outcome's always the same. They always
Yes.
can. The outcome that they want is the same.
Yep. Totally. Totally. That's one version of it. The other version of it is create a problem. And oh, by the way, I'm the solution.
Yep.
Right. So you just manufacture something like, children now have ADHD. Right. We've been
Mm.
children for hundreds of thousands of years. And now all of a sudden, if a kid is rambunctious, he's got a disease. Oh, and by the way, we have a cure for that. Not a cure, but a lifelong string you along.
Hmm.
That is how the game is played. Create a problem, provide the solution. This is how governments work, right? Create a boogeyman. The Russians, hey, we got a solution to that. The big U.S. military. And it just is just how it just keeps going, just keeps going, just keeps going. And that's how the roll goes until you step out of that and you look back and you go, yeah, I'm not playing that game anymore, bro. I'm not
Yeah.
playing that. I see the game the way it's played, not playing it. That's once you start, that's what I call extracting out of the beast. So you starve the beast of its energy, right? If I'm not playing the game, you're not getting any energy from me, and I'm not a profit center. So you're striking out twice.
Uh, well, that's what we're doing. That's what our crowd is doing. And that's how we started talking. Actually, we were emailing, and you're like, oh, I wrote a book about that. Because I was trying to say the people who are opting out of society.
Right?
That's
Yeah.
we have a few more minutes here. It's just like, that's the solution. The solution is to opt out of the system. Tons
Right.
of people are doing that in Austin. That's a main reason why I came here, because I knew that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to have to work outside the system and create our own reality, and just that's it.
Yeah, and that's the answer. I mean, the system is established, it's entrenched, it's got a couple 100-year, even longer head start. So what do you do about that? You can either choose to play their game, or you can extract yourself. And I know that's people who are working jobs right now, and totally, and I get it. That's a tall order, and you have a choice, right? You can continue to play the game, continue to be a profit center for somebody else, continue to be manipulated by somebody else, or you can take steps to end that if you so choose. It doesn't have to be done overnight. You can take, it didn't happen for Michelle and I overnight. This was a multi-year process to get to where we're at. But we did start, right? And that start for us, I'm not playing the corporate America game anymore. I'm not doing it.
You know
So
it's interesting. So some people, they don't have to take that as their first step too. They can
mm,
take the first step, not relying on the healthcare system, eating
right,
their own food, don't buy any
totally,
processed food. You can do all that, still work the corporate job, and then
right,
that could be your final step. Maybe, yeah, you still got to
totally.
get paid, and then work, save your money, do, whatever you need to do to get out of that. And then I tell people too, even my sister, I'm trying to get her to Austin. I think it's happening very soon, because she's
Nice.
stuck in California. I mean, California. What I forget what it's called.
California.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's hard. I'm like, you got to uproot your life. And I'm saying, okay, but what is most important? Your day-to-day life. You wake up, you live the day, and you go to sleep. That's what matters most. It's like you could do anything. Or what if someone said California was going to be bombed or it's going to fall into the ocean? Whatever. You would move. There is a way to move, right? So I know it's not easy, but there's a way.
Yeah. I mean, and this is everybody. And again, I respect everybody's model of the world. I respect everybody's choice. I'm just saying, like you, there is a way. The way is to completely extract yourself out of the system. You don't have to do it all in one step. You don't have to do it at all if you don't want to. And you can take baby steps, right? You can take one step, and it can be a slow process until you finally extract yourself out of the system. I will tell you this. Once you extract yourself out of the system and you look back, you will be like, how did I ever allow myself to be so bamboozled? Because I asked myself that. I look back at my corporate self and I'm like, what? What were you thinking? I mean, what were you thinking? And what I was thinking was all of the constructs and all of the stories that I had been spoon-fed my entire life. No fault of my parents, because they were spoon-fed the same BS too, right? It's just this perpetual spin. And the culture was spoon-fed the same information, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about how to prove that this is the reality, and because it's a one-way street. No one ever gets red-pilled and then goes backwards. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It's kind of like I say that with vegans too. It's like you can get tricked into going veganism, but once you like come out the other side and you start eating meat again, which is a lot of people, they go all the way carnivore, by the way. You don't go the other way. You're not like, oh, I'm going to go vegan again. No. Right. It's a one-way street.
Right.
That's how I know this is the reality.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. I got to say, I mean, being blue-pilled is comfortable because you think you're being taken care of. You have outsourced all of your problems to somebody else to take care of, essentially. Either the government's going to take care of it, healthcare is going to take care of it, my boss is going to take care of it. There's a system or person out there outside of you that's going to take care of it.
A jab's going to take care of my health.
Jab's going to take care of it. And it is very scary to go, oh no, I am going to take care of it. The buck stops with me. It's not outside, it's inside. This is an inside job. And to go from that totally I'm taken care of to, all right, I got this. That's a scary proposition for a lot of people, and I get it. Because at that point, you are working without a net to whatever degree you choose to dive into it. You are working without a net. You are your savior, in a sense. And that's empowering. That is sovereignty, and it takes a lot of responsibility, right? That's a lot of responsibility to go, I got this. Yep. All the failures, all the successes, right here.
But it's way more satisfying. You have to do
way more satisfying. Yeah. In my opinion, it is immeasurably more satisfying.
Yeah. Well, man, we could go on forever. Thanks so much. Click through the show notes. You can get Payloaf X ticket. Try to find the Primal Uprising. It's on Amazon.
Yeah. Please do.
Yeah. It was great. Yeah. I listened to the whole thing on Audible because it was nice. It was a lot quicker for me, but I enjoyed it. And thanks so much, Keith. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Nice. And let me just plug Payloaf X for a second. The dates,
absolutely.
April 29th through May 1st, Austin, Texas. And you do
we
not
didn't give the
want
dates.
to miss it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's coming up soon. Let's do it. Get to Austin. It'll be great.
Yes, do it. All right, man. Thank you.